I thought I had raised a good son until I saw the TikTok video that changed everything. My 25-year-old Derek had posted footage of himself mocking my appearance, calling me a ridiculous old lady, while imitating my walk with cruel laughter echoing through my own kitchen. The video already had thousands of likes and hundreds of comments from strangers joining in the humiliation of my gray hair and wrinkled hands. But Derek had no idea that I controlled his trust fund, and tomorrow morning, when he strutted into the bank expecting his usual withdrawal, he would discover every single penny had vanished forever. My name is Lorraine, and at 67 years old, I never imagined my own child would become my greatest source of pain. I spent 35 years working as a bank manager in Phoenix, Arizona, climbing my way up from teller to regional supervisor through sheer determination and countless overtime hours. When Derek's father walked out on us back in 2006, leaving nothing but unpaid bills and broken promises, I became both mother and provider for my 8-year-old son. Those early years nearly broke me financially and emotionally. I worked double shifts at the bank while taking night classes to advance my career. Also, Derek could have the childhood I never had. I saved every spare dollar for his college fund, skipped vacations and new clothes for myself, and ate more peanut butter sandwiches than any human should endure. When Derek graduated from Arizona State University with a business degree in 2019, I celebrated by paying off his entire $43,000 student loan debt using my retirement savings. The trust fund came from my mother's estate when she passed 3 years ago. Mama had been a frugal woman who invested wisely in real estate and blue-chip stocks throughout her 78 years. She left me $350,000 with explicit instructions to help Derek build his future. I established the trust fund, legally naming myself as trustee with complete authority over distributions until Derek turned 30 or demonstrated financial responsibility, whichever came first. Derek never showed much interest in working after college. He dabbled in various schemes he called entrepreneurial ventures, but mostly spent his days playing video games and hanging out with friends who seemed equally unmotivated. When he turned 23, I bought him a modest 3-bedroom house in Tempe, thinking homeownership might inspire maturity. Instead, it became party central for his unemployed friends. The TikTok discovery happened on a Tuesday afternoon when I was watering my rose garden. My neighbor's 16-year-old daughter Madison approached the fence with her phone in hand, her expression troubled. "Mrs. Thompson," she said hesitantly, "isn't this your son?" She handed me the phone and my world tilted sideways. There was Derek standing in my kitchen wearing one of my old aprons, hunched over dramatically, while speaking in a high-pitched voice meant to mimic mine. "Oh, Derek, honey, eat your vegetables," he squeaked, shuffling around the kitchen with exaggerated slowness. Back in my day, we walked uphill both ways to school. His friend's laughter filled the background as he continued the performance, calling me ancient and expired milk. But the comments section was where the real cruelty lived. Hundreds of young people had shared laughing, crying emojis alongside remarks like, "Put her in a nursing home already," and "Why do old people even exist?" Someone had commented, "That face suits you, old lady," with a skull emoji. The video had been viewed over 50,000 times in just 18 hours. My hands trembled as I handed Madison back her phone. She squeezed my arm gently before returning to her house, leaving me alone with the devastating realization that my son viewed me as entertainment for strangers. The worst part wasn't the public humiliation, though. That cut deep enough. What shattered my heart was recognizing my own kitchen cabinets, my late mother's china displayed in the background, and the family photos on the refrigerator that Derek had included in his cruel performance. This wasn't some spontaneous moment of poor judgment. This was a calculated production filmed in my home while I was at my weekly book club meeting. I walked inside and noticed details I'd missed earlier that day. The kitchen chairs were arranged differently, and crumbs from snacks littered the counter. Derek had invited friends into my sanctuary specifically to mock me, turning the place where I'd made thousands of his meals into a stage for his comedy routine. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan's endless rotation, my mind racing between hurt and fury. Sleep evaded me as I replayed Derek's voice calling me ridiculous over and over. By sunrise, I'd made a decision that would change both our lives forever. Instead of confronting Derek immediately, I began investigating his digital footprint with the thoroughness that had made me successful in banking. What I discovered over the next 3 days painted a picture of disrespect so pervasive it took my breath away. Derek's Instagram account, which he'd kept private from me, contained months of stories mocking my appearance and habits. Screenshots showed him complaining about my embarrassing choice to wear comfortable walking shoes instead of trendy sneakers when we went grocery shopping together. He'd posted photos of my reading glasses with captions like, "How to look ancient in one easy step," and shared videos of me humming while cooking with commentary about old people being weird. His Snapchat account was even worse. Through a mutual acquaintance who showed me the content, I saw Derek referring to our shared living situation as stuck with the old bag and posting pictures of my prescription medication bottles with jokes about keeping the zombie alive. He'd created an ongoing series called Living with Grandma Chronicles, where he documented my daily activities as if they were exhibits in a museum of outdated behavior. The most devastating discovery came through my friend Eleanor's granddaughter, who attended Arizona State, with Derek's girlfriend Brittany. She forwarded screenshots from a group chat where Derek had shared photos of me sleeping in my recliner after long days at volunteer work, calling them evidence that I was basically already dead inside. But Derek's cruelty extended beyond social media mockery. When I accessed his financial records through my legal authority as trustee, I found expenses that made my blood pressure spike. In just 2 months, he'd spent $30,000 on luxury items that had nothing to do with job searching or education. Designer clothes, expensive dinners at Scottsdale restaurants, weekend trips to Las Vegas, and even a down payment on a BMW lease he'd hidden from me. Every time Derek had asked for money for job interview clothes or networking events, he'd actually been funding a lifestyle of complete irresponsibility. The receipts told the real story: $700 shoes, $1,000 dinners for him and Brittany, and hotel suites that cost more per night than I'd spent on groceries in a month. My banking background served me well as I researched financial law changes that had occurred since my retirement. New privacy regulations and trust fund structures offered opportunities I hadn't known existed. I contacted my former colleague, Patricia, who now worked as a financial consultant, and learned about legal ways to restructure trust funds for better asset protection. Lorraine. Patricia explained during our coffee meeting at a quiet cafe in Old Town Scottsdale, "As the trustee, you have broad discretionary powers. If the beneficiary demonstrates fiscal irresponsibility or uses funds contrary to the trust's purpose, you can absolutely modify the distribution structure." Armed with this knowledge, I began the delicate process of moving Derek's money into new accounts under different legal structures. Everything I did was completely legal and within my rights as trustee, but it required careful documentation and proper paperwork filing with the appropriate authorities. The real shock came when I discovered Derek had been charging his friends for access to our home. Through bank records, I found Venmo payments totaling $847 from various young people with payment descriptions like content fee and filming location. My son had literally been monetizing my humiliation, turning my home into a paid comedy club where I was the unwitting star of his cruel show. For the next week, I became an actress worthy of an Academy Award. Every interaction with Derek required careful performance, as I pretended complete ignorance of his social media activities while secretly gathering evidence that would protect me legally. Derek's behavior during this period revealed the true depth of his disrespect. He brought friends over almost daily, and they made no effort to hide their amusement at my expense. I'd overhear snickering when I walked past and catch them filming me with their phones as I went about normal household tasks. Tuesday evening, Derek's friend Marcus filmed me struggling to open a jar of pickles, later posting it online with commentary about watching evolution in reverse. Wednesday morning, his friend Tyler recorded me reading the newspaper with my glasses, adding sound effects to make my page turning seem dramatically loud and annoying. I played my part perfectly, bringing them homemade chocolate chip cookies while they mocked my old lady recipes behind my back. I asked politely about their job searches, knowing full well they spent their days creating content designed to humiliate me. When Derek complained about needing money for interview clothes, I nodded sympathetically while planning his financial reckoning. My phone, strategically placed in my apron pocket, recorded conversations that revealed the true scope of Derek's deception. He'd been telling people I was losing my mind and might need professional care soon, laying groundwork for what I now realized was a planned takeover of my assets. The old lady's getting confused more often. I heard him tell Brittany during a phone call he thought was private. Yesterday, she put salt in her coffee instead of sugar. I think we need to start discussing her living situation. The salt in coffee incident had never happened. Derek was fabricating evidence of my supposed mental decline, creating a narrative that would justify removing my independence and accessing my savings account. During my evidence-gathering week, I learned Derek had never actually applied for any of the jobs he claimed to be interviewing for. A few discreet phone calls to local companies confirmed that Derek Thompson had never submitted applications or contacted their human resources departments. His daily absences from the house, which he claimed were job hunting activities, were actually visits to Brittany's apartment or shopping excursions funded by his trust fund withdrawals. I discovered his drug use when I found a small plastic bag of white powder hidden inside his old baseball glove in the garage. A quick internet search helped me identify it as cocaine, which explained Derek's sometimes erratic behavior and excessive spending patterns. I photographed the drugs and their hiding place, adding this evidence to my growing file. The most chilling discovery came Friday evening when I overheard Derek talking to Brittany's father about real estate market conditions in my neighborhood. Through careful eavesdropping, I learned that Robert Sullivan, Brittany's father, was a real estate developer who specialized in buying undervalued properties from elderly homeowners. "The old lady doesn't understand what her house is really worth," Derek said during their phone conversation. "She bought it in 1992 for $85,000, but it's worth at least $420,000 now. She keeps talking about staying here forever, but I think we can convince her that downsizing to a retirement community would be better for her health." My house, which I'd owned outright for 15 years after paying off the mortgage early, had indeed appreciated significantly. But more importantly, it was my sanctuary filled with memories of Derek's childhood and my late parents' belongings. The idea that Derek and this stranger were plotting to manipulate me into selling felt like a violation of everything sacred in my life. The conversation continued with Robert offering Derek a finder's fee of $20,000 if he could convince me to list the house with his development company. They discussed strategies for making me feel unsafe living alone and approaches for presenting retirement communities as safer alternatives for someone my age. That night, I contacted my attorney, Margaret Donovan, who'd handled my mother's estate and my trust fund paperwork. Margaret had been practicing elder law for 23 years and had seen every type of family financial abuse imaginable. "Lorraine, what you're describing is textbook elder abuse," Margaret explained during our Saturday morning meeting at her downtown Phoenix office. "The good news is that you've been documenting everything properly. The recordings, photographs, and financial records you've gathered would hold up in court if necessary." Margaret helped me understand my legal options, including filing charges for fraud due to Derek's forged signatures on documents I'd found hidden in his room. She also guided me through the process of protecting my house through an irrevocable trust that would make it impossible for anyone to force a sale against my wishes. By Sunday evening, I had gathered enough evidence to protect myself legally and financially. Derek's trust fund money sat in accounts I could legally close at any time his drug possession was documented through photographs that could be turned over to police, and his conspiracy to defraud me was recorded in his own voice. The trap was set, and Derek had no idea his world was about to collapse. Monday morning arrived with typical Arizona sunshine, but the atmosphere in my house felt charged with anticipation. Derek stumbled downstairs around 11:30, his usual late start to another day of unemployment disguised as networking. I was washing dishes from my solitary breakfast, maintaining the peaceful routine I'd followed for years. "Morning, Mom." Derek yawned, scratching his stubbled face while opening my refrigerator and helping himself to the orange juice I'd bought specifically for my morning vitamin routine. "Good morning, honey," I replied with the same gentle tone I'd used throughout his childhood. "There are fresh muffins on the counter if you're hungry." Derek grabbed 2 banana nut muffins without acknowledgement, cramming half of one into his mouth while scrolling through his phone. I could see TikTok's distinctive interface reflecting in his eyes, probably checking the latest comments on videos mocking me or planning his next cruel post. The morning's carefully normal interaction masked the frantic preparation happening inside my mind. Margaret had spent Sunday afternoon helping me finalize paperwork that would legally dissolve Derek's trust fund, transferring the money to 3 carefully chosen charities focused on preventing elder abuse. The paperwork sat on my bedroom dresser, requiring only my signature to become binding and irreversible. Derek's casual cruelty continued throughout the week as I maintained my performance of oblivious motherhood. Tuesday afternoon, he brought home his friend Kevin, a 26-year-old who had never held a job longer than 3 months. I overheard them in the living room planning Derek's next social media content. "You should film her trying to use your old PlayStation," Kevin suggested between bites of the sandwiches I'd prepared for them. "Old people and technology is always hilarious." "That's brilliant." Derek laughed. "I'll set it up so she can't figure out the controller, then edit it to make her look even more confused." They discussed camera angles and editing techniques for maximizing my humiliation while I cleaned their lunch dishes in the next room. The casual way they planned to exploit my unfamiliarity with gaming systems felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. Wednesday brought an escalation that nearly broke my resolve to wait for the perfect moment. Derek posted another TikTok this time, filming me from behind as I folded laundry, adding text overlay that read, "When you're stuck living with someone from the Jurassic period." The video showed my careful attention to sorting his clothes by color and fabric type tasks I'd performed lovingly for decades, presented as evidence of my obsolescence. The comments section exploded with suggestions for putting the old dinosaur out of her misery and advice about good retirement homes in Arizona. Someone had shared the video to a Facebook group called Annoying Parents Chronicles, where it gained another 15,000 views and hundreds of additional cruel comments. But the final straw came Thursday evening when Derek deliberately knocked my late mother's china teacup off the kitchen counter while I was cooking dinner. The delicate porcelain painted with tiny roses and gold trim shattered against the tile floor in a sound that felt like my heart breaking. "Oops," Derek said with obvious insincerity, already pulling out his phone to film my reaction. "Guess that old junk couldn't handle modern life." As I knelt to collect the precious fragments, tears streaming down my face, Derek recorded my anguish for his TikTok audience. The resulting video, posted within hours, showed my devastating grief, with a caption reading, "Dramatic old lady nonsense over some ancient cup." That video received more engagement than any of his previous posts, with viewers sharing their own stories of elderly relatives being dramatic about worthless antiques and suggestions for teaching old people to live in reality. Friday morning brought the discovery that pushed me past the point of forgiveness. While checking my mailbox, I found it had been tampered with, the lock slightly bent and scratches around the edges. Derek had been intercepting my mail to access my bank statements and financial documents. Hidden under Derek's mattress, I found copies of my investment account statements, property tax records, and insurance policies. He'd been calculating my net worth and sharing the information with people outside our family. Handwritten notes in Derek's messy scrawl detailed my assets. House worth $400,000 checking account, usually around $15,000 investment accounts total, $230,000 life insurance, pays $500,000. Derek had scheduled a meeting with Adult Protective Services for the following Tuesday, claiming I'd been showing signs of dementia and needed professional evaluation. The appointment confirmation letter, hidden among his paperwork, outlined his concerns about my declining mental capacity and unsafe living conditions. Robert Sullivan, Brittany's father, had already been in contact with 2 local memory care facilities, requesting information about availability and costs for an elderly woman whose family was concerned about her safety. The brochures were tucked inside Derek's backpack, along with notes about facility quality and monthly costs versus property sale proceeds. Margaret's investigation into Robert Sullivan revealed a disturbing pattern. He'd been involved in 3 similar cases over the past 2 years, each involving adult children who'd been coached to report parental incompetency while real estate deals were arranged in the background. The Arizona Attorney General's office had an open investigation into his business practices, but needed more evidence to pursue charges. "Lorraine, your son isn't just betraying you," Margaret explained during our emergency Friday evening meeting. "He's participating in an organized scheme to defraud elderly homeowners. Robert Sullivan has been recruiting young people to target their own parents for financial exploitation." The scope of Derek's betrayal expanded beyond personal cruelty into criminal conspiracy. He wasn't just a disrespectful son making cruel videos. He was an active participant in elder abuse for financial gain. Saturday morning, I signed the papers that dissolved Derek's trust fund forever. The money, all $218,000 remaining after his excessive spending, was distributed equally among 3 organizations: the National Center on Elder Abuse, the Arizona Coalition Against Domestic Violence's Senior Protection Program, and a local nonprofit that provided legal assistance to elderly fraud victims. The transfers were processed immediately and irreversibly. Derek's safety net, funded by my mother's lifetime of careful saving, now served victims of the exact type of abuse he'd been perpetrating against me. I also contacted Detective Sarah Martinez with the Phoenix Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit, scheduling a meeting for Monday morning to present my evidence against Derek and Robert Sullivan. By Sunday evening, every piece was in place. Derek had no idea that his next attempt to access his trust fund would reveal empty accounts, or that his criminal behavior had been documented and reported to law enforcement. The trap was set, and Monday morning would bring justice I'd waited 67 years to deliver. Monday morning at 9:15, Derek shuffled into the kitchen wearing yesterday's clothes, and the confident smirk of someone who believed his mother was too naive to challenge his behavior. He grabbed his keys from the counter and announced his intention to visit the bank. "Need to grab some cash for the week," he said, not bothering to look up from his phone. "Brittany and I are going to that new steakhouse in Scottsdale tonight." I nodded from my position at the sink, hiding my smile behind a coffee mug decorated with sunflowers my mother had given me years ago. "Have a good day, honey." Derek strutted out the door without a backward glance, completely unaware that his world was about to crumble. I watched through the kitchen window as he climbed into the BMW I'd unknowingly funded, music thumping loud enough to rattle the neighbors' windows as he drove away. At 9:45, my phone rang. Derek's panicked voice crackled through the speaker with an urgency I'd never heard before. "Mom, something's wrong with my bank account," he said, his usual cocky tone replaced by genuine confusion. "The teller said all my accounts show zero balances. She said they've been closed." "That's strange, Derek," I replied with practiced innocence. "Maybe it's a computer error. These things happen with banks sometimes." "No, Mom, you don't understand." Derek's voice climbed higher with each word. "Everything's gone. The trust fund, the checking account, even the savings account I've had since college." The teller whispered that all accounts were deleted by the trustee. "That's you, Mom. What did you do?" The beautiful irony of Derek learning about consequences through whispered bank teller conversations, the same type of humiliation he'd subjected me to through social media, wasn't lost on me. But I maintained my gentle tone, giving no indication of the satisfaction flooding through my veins. "Derek, sweetheart, I think you should come home so we can discuss this calmly," I suggested. "I'm sure there's an explanation." While Derek raced home in his soon-to-be repossessed BMW, I made my way to the Phoenix Police Department for my 10 o'clock meeting with Detective Martinez. The evidence I'd gathered filled 2 manila folders, photographs of Derek's drug possession recordings of his conspiracy conversations with Robert Sullivan, documentation of forged signatures and bank records showing his fraudulent financial activities. Detective Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s who specialized in elder abuse cases, reviewed my materials with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen too many families destroyed by greed. "Mrs. Thompson, this is one of the most comprehensive evidence packages I've received from a victim," she said, spreading Derek's forged power of attorney documents across her desk. "Your son's signature on these financial forms doesn't match his legitimate signature on file with the Motor Vehicle Department. That constitutes felony fraud." The detective explained that Robert Sullivan was already under federal investigation for organizing elder abuse schemes across 3 states. Derek's recorded conversations provided the missing link between Sullivan's operation and specific instances of fraud, making Derek both a victim recruiter and a co-conspirator in a federal crime. "We'll execute search warrants this afternoon," Detective Martinez assured me. "Your son will be arrested on charges of elder abuse, fraud, drug possession, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes against a vulnerable adult." Given the federal implications with Sullivan's involvement, Derek could face up to 15 years in prison. While I met with law enforcement, Derek was discovering the full scope of his powerlessness. Patricia, my former banking colleague who'd helped restructure the trust fund later, told me about Derek's increasingly frantic visits to multiple bank branches, each confirming the same devastating news: his money was gone forever, legally distributed to charities through proper trustee authority. By noon, Derek's desperation reached new heights. He called Brittany's father, demanding immediate access to the $20,000 finder's fee they'd discussed for manipulating me into selling my house. Robert Sullivan, apparently aware that law enforcement was closing in, told Derek their deal was canceled and hung up on him. Derek's social media presence, which had brought him such cruel joy for months, became a liability as his friends began distancing themselves from his sudden financial downfall. The same people who'd participated in mocking me now worried about being associated with someone facing serious criminal charges. Brittany broke up with Derek through a text message sent while he sat in my driveway, unable to afford gas to drive anywhere else. The message, which Derek showed me in a desperate attempt to gain sympathy, read, "My dad says you're radioactive now and I can't be seen with you. Don't contact me anymore." When Derek stumbled through my front door at 2:30 that afternoon, his face was pale and his hands shook with a combination of panic and withdrawal from whatever substances he'd been using. The confident young man who'd spent months monetizing my humiliation was replaced by a frightened child who finally understood that actions have consequences. "Mom, please," Derek begged, collapsing onto the couch where he'd entertained friends at my expense for so many months. "I need the money back. I'll do anything. I'll get a job, I'll stop the videos, I'll be a better son. Just please put the money back in my account." I sat across from him in my favorite reading chair, the same spot where he'd filmed me sleeping for his cruel social media content, and spoke with a calm I'd never felt before. "Derek, the money is gone permanently," I said, watching his face crumble as reality sank in. "It's been donated to organizations that help victims of elder abuse. The transfers cannot be reversed." Derek's panic transformed into anger as he realized I'd acted deliberately rather than accidentally. "You can't do this to me," he shouted, jumping to his feet. "That money was mine. Grandma left it for me." "Grandma left it in a trust fund that I control," I corrected firmly. "She trusted me to use it wisely for your benefit. Funding a lifestyle of cruelty and criminal behavior wasn't what she had in mind." At 3:15, Detective Martinez arrived with 2 uniformed officers and a search warrant. Derek's arrest unfolded in the same living room where he'd plotted to institutionalize me for financial gain. As handcuffs clicked around Derek's wrists, he looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and dawning understanding. The mother he'd dismissed as a ridiculous old lady had outmaneuvered him completely using the legal and financial expertise he'd never bothered to acknowledge. "Derek Thompson, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, possession of controlled substances, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes," Detective Martinez announced while reading him his rights. Derek's mugshot taken later that afternoon showed none of the smirking confidence he'd displayed in his TikTok videos. Instead, his face reflected the genuine fear of someone who'd finally encountered consequences for his actions. The same evening, local news stations picked up the story as an example of social media being used to facilitate elder abuse. Derek's original TikTok videos were broadcast on the 6 o'clock news, but this time as evidence in a criminal case rather than entertainment. By 8 o'clock that night, my house was finally peaceful again. Derek's belongings, including the phone he'd used to torment me, were in police evidence bags. His friends stopped calling when they realized their association with him could make them accessories to federal crimes. I ate dinner alone for the first time in months, without fear of being secretly filmed or mocked by hidden cameras. The silence felt like freedom after living in a war zone disguised as a family home. Justice was beginning, but Derek's reckoning had only just started. Derek's legal troubles exploded across local and national media faster than his TikTok videos had gone viral, but this time he was the subject of mockery rather than the creator of it. The irony wasn't lost on anyone following the story, especially not on social media platforms where Derek had built his cruel reputation. The Maricopa County District Attorney's Office held a press conference Tuesday morning, using Derek's case to highlight the growing problem of adult children exploiting elderly parents through social media harassment and financial fraud. District Attorney Patricia Rodriguez stood before a room full of reporters, Derek's mugshot displayed prominently on screens behind her. "This case represents a disturbing trend where technology is being weaponized against our most vulnerable citizens," Rodriguez announced. Mr. Thompson not only abused his mother emotionally through social media mockery, but participated in an organized scheme to defraud her of her home and life savings. The federal investigation into Robert Sullivan's elder abuse network had uncovered 12 similar cases across Arizona, Nevada, and California. Adult children were being recruited to report false dementia claims about parents who owned valuable real estate, allowing Sullivan's associates to purchase properties at below-market prices from families pressured into quick sales. Derek's recorded conversations with Sullivan provided prosecutors with evidence of how the scheme operated. In exchange for finder's fees ranging from $10,000 to $50,000, recruited family members would create documentation of parental incompetency file complaints with Adult Protective Services and pressure elderly relatives to sell homes quickly to pay for necessary care facilities. Derek Thompson wasn't just a disrespectful son, explained FBI Special Agent Jennifer Walsh during the press conference. He was an active participant in a multi-state conspiracy that targeted elderly homeowners for financial exploitation. Derek's first court appearance Wednesday morning drew a packed courtroom, including several elderly victims of similar schemes who wanted to witness justice being served. I sat in the front row, wearing my best navy blue dress and the pearl necklace my mother had worn to church for 60 years. Derek shuffled into the courtroom wearing an orange jail jumpsuit, his unwashed hair hanging limply around a face that showed the reality of 3 nights in county lockup. The confident young man who'd made a living mocking his mother had been replaced by someone who looked genuinely frightened for the first time in his adult life. Judge Harrison Matthews, a stern man in his 60s who'd presided over financial crimes for 15 years, reviewed the charges with obvious disgust. Mr. Thompson, you're facing multiple felony counts including elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and drug possession. Given the federal implications of this case, you could receive up to 15 years in federal prison. Derek's court-appointed attorney, a young public defender named James Crawford, looked overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence against his client. The recorded conversations, forged documents, and drug possession photographs created an almost impossible case to defend. Your Honor, my client was manipulated by older, more sophisticated criminals, Crawford argued weakly. Derek Thompson is really a victim of Robert Sullivan's recruitment efforts. Judge Matthews wasn't impressed. Mr. Thompson actively participated in planning to institutionalize his own mother through false claims of dementia. He monetized her humiliation through social media posts. This court sees no evidence of victimization, only evidence of greed and cruelty toward a woman who sacrificed decades of her life for his benefit. Derek's bond was set at $75,000, an amount he couldn't possibly afford without the trust fund he'd lost forever. He would remain in county jail until trial, experiencing the powerlessness he'd tried to impose on me through his conspiracy with Sullivan. Local news coverage of Derek's arrest sparked a social media firestorm, but this time, Derek was the target rather than the perpetrator. His original TikTok videos were shared thousands of times with new commentary condemning his behavior. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own experiences with disrespectful adult children and expressing support for elderly victims of family abuse. Justice for Lorraine became a trending hashtag on multiple platforms as people rallied around my story. Young creators posted response videos discussing the importance of respecting elderly family members and the dangers of exploiting vulnerable relatives for internet content. Margaret helped me create a response video that provided my perspective on Derek's abuse and its impact on my life. Filmed in my living room with natural lighting that showed my genuine emotions, the video included security footage of Derek and his friends vandalizing my property, audio recordings of him planning to institutionalize me, and documentation of the money he'd stolen for his excessive lifestyle. My son turned my home into a stage for cruelty. I explained to the camera, my voice steady but filled with pain. He invited strangers into my sanctuary to mock my appearance and age, treating my love and sacrifice as sources of entertainment. No parent should endure such treatment from a child they raised with dedication and love. The video received over 2 million views in 48 hours, with comments expressing overwhelming support for my decision to protect myself legally and financially. Elderly viewers shared their own stories of adult children who'd stolen money, forged documents, or attempted to force unnecessary moves to care facilities. Derek's former friends began distancing themselves as the legal implications of their participation became clear. Marcus, Tyler, and Kevin hired their own attorneys when investigators questioned them about their roles in filming content designed to humiliate me and their knowledge of Derek's drug possession. Brittany's social media accounts, which had featured expensive dinners and luxury shopping funded by Derek's stolen money, became evidence in the federal case against her father. Her participation in Derek's videos mocking me was presented as proof that Robert Sullivan's family was aware of the emotional abuse component of their financial fraud scheme. The BMW Derek had been driving was repossessed Tuesday afternoon, leaving him dependent on public transportation he'd never learned to navigate. The expensive clothes, designer shoes, and luxury accessories purchased with my mother's inheritance money became county jail property when Derek was arrested. Derek's first week in jail taught him lessons about respect and consequences that his privileged upbringing had never provided. Older inmates, many of whom had elderly mothers they deeply loved, were not sympathetic to someone who'd abused his own parent for internet fame. Prison has a different perspective on men who hurt their mothers, Detective Martinez explained when she updated me on Derek's situation. Your son is learning that his behavior isn't just legally wrong, it's morally reprehensible to most people. By Friday afternoon, Derek's attorney contacted Margaret to discuss plea bargain possibilities. Derek was facing overwhelming evidence and the prospect of 15 years in federal prison if convicted on all charges. The reality of his situation was finally penetrating his previously impenetrable sense of entitlement. Media attention brought unexpected support from around the country. I received hundreds of letters from elderly people who'd experienced similar treatment from family members, thanking me for fighting back and inspiring them to protect themselves from abuse. The Arizona State Legislature announced plans to introduce new laws specifically addressing the use of social media platforms to harass elderly family members, inspired by Derek's case and the national attention it had generated. Derek's public reckoning was complete. The young man who'd built his identity around mocking his mother's age and appearance was now nationally known as an example of elder abuse and family betrayal. His name would forever be associated with cruelty rather than comedy consequences, rather than content creation. Justice was flowing through proper legal channels, but Derek's education in accountability was just beginning. 3 months later, Derek stood before Judge Matthews for sentencing. His appearance dramatically changed from the confident young man who'd once monetized my humiliation. County jail had stripped away his arrogance, replacing it with the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd finally encountered real consequences for his actions. Derek's plea bargain, negotiated after weeks of overwhelming evidence made trial impossible, included 18 months in county jail, 5 years of supervised probation, mandatory counseling for substance abuse and behavioral issues, 500 hours of community service at elder care facilities, and a permanent restraining order preventing him from contacting me or entering my property. Mr. Thompson, Judge Matthews said sternly, your crimes represent a particularly cruel form of betrayal. You targeted the woman who sacrificed decades of her life to provide for your future, treating her love as a source of entertainment and profit. This court hopes your punishment helps you understand the gravity of what you've done. Derek's voice cracked as he addressed the court, reading from a statement his counselor had helped him prepare. Your Honor, I know my words can't undo the pain I caused my mother. I was consumed by greed and entitlement, treating someone who loved me unconditionally as if she were my enemy. I accept full responsibility for my actions and the consequences that follow. Robert Sullivan received a federal sentence of 12 years in prison for organizing the elder abuse network that had targeted vulnerable homeowners across 3 states. His conviction provided justice for dozens of elderly victims who'd lost their homes and savings to his elaborate fraud schemes. Brittany and her mother faced charges for money laundering and conspiracy, their luxury lifestyle built on proceeds from elderly victims finally catching up with them. The expensive dinners and shopping trips Derek had funded with my mother's inheritance money became evidence of their participation in criminal enterprise. During Derek's incarceration, I began rebuilding my life with a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The house that had been a stage for cruelty became a peaceful sanctuary, again filled with the sounds of classical music instead of mocking laughter. I renovated Derek's old room into a library, installing floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a reading nook by the window overlooking my rose garden. The space that had once housed someone who plotted against me became a place of learning and growth. My volunteer work expanded to include speaking engagements about elder abuse prevention and digital literacy for seniors. Libraries, community centers, and senior organizations across Arizona requested presentations about recognizing family financial exploitation and protecting against social media harassment. Technology should connect generations, not divide them. I told audiences of elderly listeners who nodded with understanding, born from their own experiences with disrespectful family members. But we must educate ourselves about digital platforms to avoid becoming victims of our own children's cruel content. The foundation I established using my mother's remaining inheritance money, called the Dignity Defense Fund, provided legal assistance to elderly victims of family financial abuse and funded research into preventing elder exploitation. Our first year of operation helped 63 seniors protect their assets from manipulative relatives and recover stolen money from fraudulent schemes. Letters continued arriving from elderly people across the country who'd found courage to protect themselves after learning about my story. A 72-year-old woman in Michigan successfully prosecuted her son for stealing her pension checks. An 80-year-old man in Florida prevented his daughter from forcing an unnecessary nursing home placement. Each victory felt like validation of my decision to fight back, rather than accept abuse silently. Derek's community service at Sunshine Manor, a local assisted living facility, exposed him to elderly residents whose families visited regularly with genuine love and respect. Watching other people treasure their elderly relatives forced Derek to confront the magnitude of what he'd lost through his cruelty. Mrs. Eleanor Pacheco, an 85-year-old resident whose grandson visited daily to read her romance novels, became Derek's unofficial counselor during his service hours. Her gentle wisdom helped Derek understand perspectives he'd never considered during his entitled youth. "Son, your mother gave you life and 25 years of love," Mrs. Pacheco told Derek as they folded laundry together in the facility's bright activity room. "Most people would treasure such a gift. Why did you choose to throw it away for internet attention?" Derek's mandatory counseling sessions with Dr. Rachel Foster, a psychologist specializing in family dysfunction, revealed the deep-seated anger about his father's abandonment that he'd misdirected toward me for years. His cruel treatment of me had been displaced rage about feeling powerless when his father walked away. Derek struggled with abandonment trauma that manifested as control issues. Dr. Foster explained during a family therapy session I attended 6 months after his sentencing. He couldn't control his father's absence, but he could control his mother's emotional state through humiliation and abuse. Understanding Derek's psychological motivations didn't excuse his behavior, but it provided context for his transformation during incarceration and community service. Facing real powerlessness in jail had forced him to confront the powerlessness he'd tried to impose on me through his conspiracy with Sullivan. Near Derek's release date, I received a handwritten letter that differed dramatically from his previous attempts at manipulation. The letter contained no requests for money, housing, or forgiveness, only a genuine acknowledgement of the pain he'd caused and acceptance of permanent consequences for his actions. "Mom, I know I destroyed our relationship beyond repair," Derek wrote in careful script that showed how much time he'd spent crafting each word. "I can't ask you to forgive me because what I did was unforgivable. I monetized your pain, betrayed your trust, and conspired to steal your independence. You gave me everything and I returned cruelty. I'm writing only to tell you that I finally understand what I lost, and I accept that I lost it forever." The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing specific instances of his cruel behavior and acknowledging the emotional damage each incident had caused. Derek demonstrated genuine understanding of how his actions had affected me, rather than focusing on his own suffering or attempting to minimize his responsibility. I read the letter twice before filing it away without response. Forgiveness might be possible eventually, but rebuilding trust would require years of sustained changed behavior, not just words written from jail. Derek's release into supervised probation came with strict conditions that reflected the seriousness of his crimes. He was required to maintain employment, submit to regular drug testing, attend weekly counseling sessions, and continue community service at elder care facilities. Any violation would result in immediate return to jail to serve the remainder of his original sentence. Derek found work at a warehouse loading trucks for minimum wage, experiencing manual labor for the first time in his adult life. His paycheck of $327 after taxes and probation fees was less than he'd once spent on a single dinner with Brittany. The modest studio apartment Derek rented in a working-class neighborhood near downtown Phoenix cost half his monthly income, leaving little money for anything beyond basic necessities. The lifestyle of luxury and leisure he'd funded with my mother's inheritance was permanently in his past. Social media platforms remained off-limits to Derek as part of his probation conditions, eliminating his ability to return to the content creation that had defined his identity before incarceration. His former online presence served as a permanent reminder of his criminal behavior, searchable by any potential employer or romantic partner. 6 months after Derek's release, I received an update from his probation officer confirming his compliance with all court-ordered conditions. Derek was working steadily, attending counseling regularly, and completing his community service hours without incident. His behavior suggested genuine rehabilitation rather than temporary compliance, motivated by fear of reincarceration. My own life had found a rhythm of purpose and peace that felt like a gift after years of walking on eggshells around Derek's unpredictable cruelty. Morning coffee in my sunlit kitchen afternoon, reading in my new library, evening phone calls with friends who'd supported me through the darkest period of our family crisis. The Arizona State Legislature passed the Digital Elder Abuse Prevention Act, inspired by Derek's case and designed to protect seniors from family members who exploit them through social media harassment. The law created new criminal categories for using technology platforms to humiliate elderly relatives and established resources for elderly victims of digital abuse. I testified before the state legislature about my experiences with Derek's social media harassment, explaining how technology had been weaponized against me by someone I'd trusted completely. My testimony helped lawmakers understand the psychological impact of being mocked online by family members and the financial exploitation that often accompanied such emotional abuse. Elder abuse has evolved with technology. I told the legislative committee, my voice steady, as I described Derek's monetization of my humiliation. Adult children can now profit from their parents' pain in ways previous generations never imagined. We must update our laws to address these new forms of exploitation. The Foundation's work expanded beyond individual cases to include educational programs about family financial boundaries and warning signs of adult children who view elderly parents as sources of income rather than people deserving respect. Our workshops helped families establish healthy financial relationships before crisis situations developed. As I reflect on this journey from victim to advocate, I'm struck by how Derek's cruelty ultimately led to positive changes that benefit elderly people across our state and nation. His attempt to destroy my dignity became a catalyst for protecting other seniors from similar abuse. The life lesson that emerged from this painful experience centers on the fundamental importance of self-worth and boundary setting, even with family members we love deeply. I learned that protecting yourself from toxic relationships isn't selfish. It's necessary for survival and well-being. Love doesn't require accepting abuse. Caring for family members doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. Being someone's mother doesn't obligate you to fund their cruelty or enable their exploitation of your kindness. My mother's inheritance, which Derek tried to steal for his selfish purposes, ultimately served her intended goal of helping him build a better future. But that future required him to learn accountability, respect, and genuine appreciation for the sacrifices others make on his behalf. Today, at 68 years old, I wake up each morning in a house filled with peace instead of anxiety. I volunteer with organizations that prevent elder abuse, speak to groups about digital literacy and family boundaries, and maintain friendships with people who value my experience and wisdom rather than viewing my age as a source of entertainment. Derek remains on probation for 4 more years, working his warehouse job and attending counseling sessions that help him understand the long-term consequences of his choices. Whether genuine redemption is possible for him depends on sustained effort over time, not just temporary compliance motivated by legal requirements. Our relationship may never recover completely, but my story demonstrates that elderly people don't have to accept abuse silently. We have legal rights, financial options, and community resources available to protect ourselves from exploitation by family members who mistake our love for weakness. I hope my experience encourages other elderly victims of family abuse to seek help, document mistreatment, and prioritize their own well-being over misplaced loyalty to relatives who exploit their kindness. Age brings wisdom and legal protections that can be powerful tools for justice when used correctly. The Foundation continues growing, helping more seniors each year recognize and escape abusive family relationships, while educating communities about the warning signs of elder exploitation. Each success story validates the difficult decision I made to prioritize my own dignity over Derek's immediate comfort. What started as a cruel TikTok video mocking my appearance became a national conversation about elder abuse, family respect, and the proper use of technology in relationships. Derek's attempt to humiliate me ultimately empowered other elderly victims to protect themselves and demand the respect they deserve. Sometimes the greatest act of love is setting boundaries that force harmful people to confront the consequences of their actions. Derek learned about accountability through experiencing powerlessness, developing empathy by serving people whose families treat them with genuine care. My story proves that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, regardless of your age or the identity of your abuser. Dignity is worth fighting for, and justice is possible when you have courage to pursue it through proper legal channels. I encourage every viewer watching this to examine their own family relationships and ask themselves, do you treat elderly relatives with the respect they deserve? Do you recognize the warning signs of abuse in your own family or community? Are you willing to speak up when you witness elder mistreatment? Please share this story with others who might benefit from understanding that elder abuse is preventable and that victims have more power than they might realize. Like this video if you believe elderly people deserve respect and protection. Subscribe to learn about other stories of courage and justice. Comment below with your thoughts about family boundaries and the importance of treating our elders with dignity. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting elderly victims of family abuse. I wish each of you strong family relationships built on mutual respect and genuine love. Remember that age should bring honor, not humiliation, and that every person deserves to live their later years with dignity and peace.